I get lots of questions. So I've been trying the last couple of weeks to try to start answering some of these questions. I've noticed that one of the things we have a tendency to do is if I just do the Torah portion, I end up not really noticing how long I've focused on that and end up leaving a lot of stuff out. So interesting question is just, what is Torah? What is law? How do we approach that whole concept? What is law to a believer? The world, we know that, in Hebrew, it means instructions, the instructions of God. And of course, automatically we think, well, the Son of God could have come along and to do away with his Father's instructions if there were one. That's a little weird. But the other thing that's really popularly taught in the world is that law is the opposite of grace. Real common teaching and is like, well, is it law or is it grace? Well, if you think about it, they cannot be opposites. Okay, the instructions of God can't be the opposite of the grace of God. In fact, if you did not have the instructions, you wouldn't have any instructions to break, and therefore grace wouldn't be necessary. You just get away with the instructions, do away with those, and there would be no need for grace. But the problem is life itself, life and blessings are from the Torah. That's what it says. That's where blessings in this life and just in the physical life, why things happen the way they do spiritually, are based in the Torah. And so it's really this standard. You can't have grace without some kind of a standard to compare it to. Like God sets the standard, we break the standard, then we need grace to be restored. So because it's been violated. Paul talks about it a lot. He says, is the law sin in Romans 7? And he said, don't even say that. He said, I didn't even know what sin was without the law. How would we know? If God didn't tell us, give us instruction, we wouldn't even know what it is, right? So he said, goes on and said, I wouldn't know what lust was or that it was a bad thing, except that the Torah, the law said, you shall not lust. And I'm like, oh, okay, I shouldn't do that. So that's how we know. We have these instructions. Then he gets into this interesting thing where he talks about it being revived, okay? And he's talking a little bit esoterically, and it gets people confused. So I'm going to ease through this. In verse 9, he says, I was alive without the law, without the instructions of God at one time, but then when the commandment came, sin revived and I died. What's he mean? That almost sounds like it's a confusing statement. What he's saying is before he had the law, before he had the instructions of God, he didn't know what sin was. So he's walking along, he's committing sin and doesn't even know it. A lot of people in the world that way today. They're committing sin all the time. Curses are coming into their life. They have no idea why their life is a train wreck. And then they discover the instructions of God or the law. And from that, he said, then I'll go, oh my goodness, this thing is what's killing me because I'm breaking this instruction of God and this is what's attacking me. So he says, it came to life and I died. When sin came to life, I died, it killed me, okay? And so he says, then the commandment, which is to life, meaning the Torah is life, it says that over and over, so they do this and live. Okay, so one of the Hebraic understanding of the law and how to apply it is if we're walking in the instructions of God, in the Torah of God, and it's not producing life, then you're not walking in the instructions of God. You're doing something else. You're following the letter of the law, or in other words, you're taking it far enough out of the way God intended it that it's not producing life. If we're doing it the way he intended it, it will always produce life. Okay, so it's about life. Torah is life. As he says, this commandment, which was supposed to be life, became death to me. So it was like, and he goes on and it's like, so why? Why did it become death? Because once again, because he discovered that what he was doing was against the Torah. He discovered that when it says to do this, that he lived in a fleshly body and it doesn't always do what the instructions say. It says do this and he finds himself, he goes into great detail about that, about this battle that he has in his flesh where he wants to do one thing because it's God's instruction, but he ends up doing something else and it becomes death to him. He says, sin, taking the occasion by the commandment, deceived me. Okay, so sin sin, this idea of sin, and Paul's understanding is that sin is in his flesh. He just thinks about it. He said, this flesh, I got sin in my flesh. In other words, he's just recognizing that he has a fallen body, living in a fallen world, and that his thoughts are generally not God's thoughts. And so on the average, they're totally against God's instruction. So he said, this sin, these thoughts of sin, now that I know what the commandments are, now they're deceiving me. Now they're telling me, yeah, do this. It's okay. It's okay. Like nobody's going to know. Like God's not watching. Okay. Like you won't know. I mean, of course somebody's going to know. He says, so it deceived me. And that's what sin does. That's what the enemy does. That's what our thoughts do. It's like, oh, it's okay. It's okay. No. And so you go do this thing. And the main thing is, you know it. And the enemy's going to torment you with that. And of course, God's instructions, he's no respecter of persons. So when he says, if you do this, this is going to happen, then when you do that, that's going to happen. It's not going to bring blessings. It's going to be, and he says, it killed me. And he's talking spiritually. Obviously, he's writing spiritually. So spiritually, it's like it's killing my spirit, man, when I do things like this. And so then he said, this is all because, in verse 12, 7:12, Romans, he says, indeed, the Torah, the law, is holy. Okay? It's good. It's holy. And the commandment is holy, and it is just, and it is good. Okay? And so he's saying these are all good things. Okay? Now, the enemy tells us that no, they're bad things. He's got like the majority of the world probably convinced that the instructions of God are a bad thing. And so they just, oh, no, that's not for me. But it's the source of life. It's the source of blessing. And so we confuse what is instructions and what is grace. And we're going to go on into that in just a second. But one of the things the enemy will tell us that when we're trying to keep the instructions of God, well, we're doing it right. And woe to all these sinners over here who are doing it wrong. And of course, we see that in Scripture. We see Yeshua, who kept it perfectly, being accused. We see him when he goes in and he goes into the Pharisee's house for lunch or dinner, and he's been accused already of eating with tax collectors and sinners, and now he's sitting there, and there's this woman who's probably a prostitute from what we can tell, who's massaging his feet with oil. And the Pharisee, who's the Torah keeper of his day, is going, man, this guy's not a prophet. If he's a prophet, he would know who this woman is, and he would know that, he wouldn't let her touch him. But he goes on to explain, no, she's doing a good thing. So I come in and, you gave me no water, and she's washed my feet with tears. You didn't give me any oil for my head, and she hasn't stopped anointing my feet since I've been here. So he shows them that. And he goes on to say, he says, sick people, the well people don't need a doctor, don't need a physician. It's like the sick people who need a physician. He said, I didn't come to save the righteous, I came to save the sinners. Okay? And so, but ultimately what he's also saying, that's a little tongue in cheek, because none are righteous, no, not one. And the Pharisee has really who Rishim, which means the righteous one or something to that effect in Hebrew. Basically, they picture themselves as, we're the Torah keepers, we're the ones who's doing it right. And unfortunately, we have a bunch of Hebrews and Messianics out there today who have really taken the place of the Pharisees. This spirit is alive and well. and because we have gotten grace mixed up, we have gotten confused about how it works. And so I want to talk about that just a little bit. Grace actually happens, we actually find grace happening in the Torah before disobedience even happens, if you think about it, okay? If you think about it, if you go back to the garden, we got, just for example, we have Adam and Eve there, right? And they've got basically two instructions, like be fruitful, multiply, and don't eat that, whatever that was, okay? It's like, don't eat that, and other than that, rock on, okay? And so the serpent comes, so that's only two commandments. There was nothing before that, everything was okay. They came, serpent shows up. Now, realize that the serpent knows that these two people are going to be their offspring are going to fill the whole world. God's just told them, be fruitful, multiply, and they know that God's going to bless that, and they're going to fill the whole world. And he wants to destroy mankind, right? We know that today. So here's my question. Why didn't he say, Adam, you better kill that woman, because if you don't, she's going to kill you during the night one day. Think about that. Eve, why don't you pull a, I just had a bad thought. It didn't involve Lorraine or but most people won't Bali. Yeah, I went there, I'm sorry. The kids are looking it up now on the internet. But basically, it's like, why don't you make this mess up? You don't want to have kids. You don't want it's going to be, whatever. What's interesting is God had only given them this simple instruction: be fruitful, multiply, don't eat that. And why doesn't he come up with something like kill him? Just kill him, because he's going to be a bad guy. You have no idea what he's going to do to you one day, and you better just kill him. And then, by the way, you'll be in charge of the whole garden. It'll be your garden, not Adam's garden, and everything will be cool, right? This is like Women's Lib 101. You will be in charge of the world, okay? He could have promoted that idea. Why didn't he? Okay. What's interesting is what he attacked was the instruction of God. He attacked that very first instruction, okay? And so really what happens is when we get instruction, that's where we start. And I think this is really what Paul's talking about. Sin bubbles up where we have instruction. He said, before there was any instruction, I didn't worry about it. And so they didn't have any instruction. They really hadn't been told not to murder, as far as we know. Just said, don't eat that, don't do that. Okay, so they didn't have any. So murder almost wasn't even a concept. It's almost like when we're told not to do something because we're fallen. They weren't at the time, but because we're fallen, we tend to want to do that. Our kids, babies, you don't have to teach them to be bad. You have to teach them to be good. If you want them when they're young to eat something, what do you say? Don't you eat that. What kind of weirdness is that? They're so messed up from birth in a fallen world that they will actually parents sometimes tell them to do the opposite of what they want them to do because they know that fallen little kid's going to do it anyway. Okay? So grace was there, right? Okay. Now here's another interesting one. How about the Exodus? Think about the Exodus coming out of Egypt. God shows up. He tells them what's going to happen. I need you to follow these Passover instructions, and they did it. They put the blood on the doorpost. They came out of Egypt. They got all this gold and jewelry, right? And they're like partying. They're going out of Egypt. They got their bread on their shoulder, waiting for it to rise as they go out. They're eating it before it even rise. They go through the storm. They go to the bitter waters. All these amazing things happen, and all along the way, they can't actually see God. They see clouds, they see thunder, they see all these things. They don't see God. They know there's like something there. And they've come out of Egypt. We know that in Egypt, they were steeped in that world of disobedience. Of Egypt, they were surrounded by all these gods and stuff. And it's not till they get to Mount Sinai, and God tells Moshe, it's like, go down and tell the people this. Here's what I want you to do. And so he goes down and he tells them what God wants them to do. And what do the people say? All he said, we'll do it. Actually, the first time, there wasn't even any detail. He just like, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be your God, and I want you to follow my instruction. Whatever you say, we will do. We don't even care what it is. Whatever you say, we will do. How do you know you will do it? Oh, we just trust you, Lord. And then Moshe takes a little longer than they were expecting. And what do they do with all this gold that they've been wandering around with? Why all of a sudden? Why not make one at the Red Sea? When they're like really think they're gonna let's make a calf real quick. Don't make one. They wait until they get this instruction, and as soon as they get this, before they even know what it is, okay? Here they are breaking this major commandment about idolatry. Isn't that interesting? I think this is what Paul's talking about, that the enemy, that sin within us is rebellious, and it waits until we get an instruction, and then we want to rebel against it. It's just true. It's just true. So here's the thing that's kind of interesting about this. How much did they have to do on this whole process of coming out of Egypt, having the largest, most sophisticated military on the planet be destroyed before their very eyes, and now this bunch of slaves who don't even have weapons walks out of this situation, and they're just walking in the blessings of Messiah. They're walking in the blessings of Yahweh, okay? The blood is a picture of the forgiveness of Messiah. We know that, okay? And so what are they doing? What's that called? There's a word for that. When they haven't done anything good, for sure, we know they're probably all just mixed up in the paganism that's all around them. How could they not have been? Okay? They're basically being forced to be in it. And yet they just walk out. God parts the Red Sea. You know, they walk through this frozen Red Sea, you know, cross to the other side. All of a sudden, you know, it crushes and destroys the army, and now they have weapons and stuff so they can fight Amalek. You know, and what have they done to deserve any of this? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. In fact, quite the opposite. They don't deserve this. And that's called grace. Right? So they're walking under grace and everything's fine. So their grace is happening before the law. Grace is not new. This is all grace. It happens before the law. And so they end up, all they have to do is, you know, basically pray, and they had prayed, and God answered their prayers, not based on anything they had done. And this is what we got to get about grace. These people Israel did not even have the Torah, and they got grace. So I first put out an idea that we need grace because we've broken the Torah. But I don't want you to think that we have to do the Torah to have grace, because Israel had grace before they had the Torah. Okay? Israel had grace because that's who God is. Grace is who God is. It is a picture of who he is. He didn't wait for them to break the law to come up with grace. He gave them grace before that. And of course, we know we can go all the way back to Noah. It says Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, and all these things. So is this idea, and so as he goes to, in Exodus chapter 6, it's interesting because in that, God tells him what he's going to do. He says, I'm Yahweh. He says, I've heard the groanings. I've heard your prayers. Okay. I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will rid you from their bondages. And I'm reading these because we're going to read these at Passover. So this is part of the Passover Seder. So but I want you to get this picture in your mind. So I'm going to bring you out from under the burdens. I'm going to rid you out of their bondage. I'm going to redeem you with an outstretched arm and great judgment. And I'm going to take you to me for a people. And I will be your God. And I will show you who I am. And you will know that I'm Yahweh. And then I will bring you into the land that I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so then there's this next sentence that's left out of most of our Bibles. And it says, if you do what? There's a reason it's left out, because it doesn't exist. Okay? If you do nothing, he didn't say there was no if. There is no if there. He's like, I'm going to do this and this and this and this and this, and this is pure grace, and that's what I'm going to do for you. Because you just said help, basically. Help. Okay? You have nothing to offer. What are we going to offer God? What are we going to offer God? So grace is like that. You know, pure grace is simply that Yahweh is who he says he is. Okay? This is grace in the Torah. This is grace in spite of Torah. They don't deserve grace. We know what the instructions are. They've broken them all. And so here's the deal. If you deserve grace, it's not grace. Paul talks about that. You're just getting your wages. You're just getting paid what you're owed. Grace is nothing that you're owed. So we get confused about how it works. We think that we try to keep the Torah and then accept grace when we fail. That's actually backwards. I'm going to show you that. You know, and that's what I would call trying and then trusting. And it's backwards. And what does the enemy do? One of the classic things he does is turn things upside down, puts them back together, It's upside down. Looks right. Everything's there. Yeah, I see all those words in the Bible, but they're out of order. Classic thing he does. But it's not trying and then trusting. What we're supposed to be doing is trusting and then trying. That's the way grace works. Trust first. Israel trusted God to come out of Egypt, and he did what he said he was going to do. So they trusted him first. These people walked through, if I interpret this correctly, and I think I do, they walked through this, whatever it was a stormy sea that I think is frozen actually with big blocks of ice. It had to be freaky scary, whatever it was. And they walked through with this army behind them, this fire, in back of them. And they're like, how do we know we're going to make it across? I mean, the first guy, through there has got to be, we got to have some pretty serious faith. We think we know who it is. It's not Shun, probably the leader of Judah. But it's interesting that they did that just by faith, and it worked, and God destroyed their enemies. So what they're doing is they're trusting God first, and then that builds that relationship. What does Yeshua say about that? Yeshua says, if you love me, then keep my commandments. He doesn't say keep my commandments and that'll help you love me. Okay? That's where we're messed up. It says, if you love me, what is that? That's relationship. You got to have that relationship, that love relationship. That means you have some kind of dialogue going on. You have experience with him. So Israel is developing an experience with God as they're delivered out of their bondage. And so once that happens, he says, now that you know who I am, now that you know that I'm your mighty one, I'm the one that loves you, cares about you, and just gave you all this grace. Here's how I would like for you to live. Here's how our relationship can be brought forth. And of course, the first 4 commandments are completely about relationship with God. How do we do that? And of course, the last 6 are about how you get along with your brothers and sisters, because humans are a lot harder to get along than God is. It only takes 4 for him. It takes 6 for people. Percentage-wise, it's actually pretty big. Okay? So it's just relation. And here's what's interesting. He says, so if you love me, and that's relationship, and so if you already have a relationship with Messiah and you have your sins forgiven, then we desire from our heart, when we love somebody, we have a relationship with them, and we want, it's like, what can I do? What would make you happy? We want to do something like, and it's coming from our heart. And John 14:15 says, if you love me, keep my commandments. And this is kind of interesting. That's 14:15. And 15:14 actually says this. He says, if you love me, keep my commandments. You are my friends if you do whatever I command you. So in both places there, he's like, this is about relationship first and then instructions. Okay? Relationship with Yeshua first, then keeping the commands, which allows you then to walk in blessings, because that's what he wants us to do. Part of his relationship, what can I do? Well, what I really want you to do is, if you'll follow this instruction, you'll walk in blessings. We do that to our kids. We say, hey, if you'll do this and do this, you'll be blessed later on. This will work. I didn't do it this way, but I know, I've seen it. I know what works. If you'll do it this way, this will help you out. This will help you in school. This will help you, in your business. This will help you, okay? And so it's relationship first, and then we want them to walk in blessings. Well, we're God's children, so he's going to give us instructions to help us walk in blessings, because he loves us and he sees us reaching out, and we want to, have this relationship with him. And so we have, in this relationship with Yeshua, we have the opportunity to be forgiven from this interesting thing in the law. It's called the curse of the law, because if we break the law, there's a curse of the law. Of course, the wages of the sin, and that's what Paul's talking about, the wages of breaking the law is death. And he's not just talking about physical death, that's part of it. That came all the way from Adam, but he's talking about eternal death, the violent destruction the Bible describes it as in Greek. And so it's like the lake of fire. We can avoid that. And so that's the ultimate grace, to be forgiven, when the curse of the law is saying that you need to be destroyed, but we can be forgiven from that because of our relationship, because of his grace, and live eternally with him. So this is interesting. So grace, technically, the technical term is it's unmerited favor. And so where does that come from? Does that come from our ability to work, our ability to keep the Torah? No, because if it's based on how well we keep the Torah, or how well we point out how other people are not keeping the Torah, please. So if it was based on anything we did, and here, this is important. If your relationship, if your understanding of salvation, if your understanding of your relationship with God is based on keeping the Torah, or even any part of it, if you have added to it one bit, you have fallen from grace. If you have added to your merit one speck, it's not grace anymore. It's your works. So, you know, I mean, Revelation talks about when we get in the holy city, in the New Jerusalem, you know, we're going to be angels and everybody going to be praising. Worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb. Praise his holy name. He is worthy because he did it all. And I helped him just a little bit. It don't say that. Nobody's going to be standing there saying, yeah, and I helped. I remember when I did all these cool things, you know, the Torah, because I'm a Torah guy. You know. And so there's the enemy's trick. He actually has, it's an old trick, and he recycles stuff. He's the great recycler because he recycles stuff because it works. He's tried this over the centuries and it keeps working, so he keeps trying it, and he keeps thinking, we keep thinking that we can add something to the work of Messiah on his cross. And we can't. You know, it was that destruction, that willingness to come up and pay the price for us that paid for everything. And I see people, you know, come like, well, I can't be paid for this, so I got to work really hard. Come on. There's what could you have possibly done that's more powerful than the spilt blood and the grace of Messiah Yeshua? Absolutely nothing. So just tell the enemy to shut up. There's a coronavirus. Stay back. Give me at least 6 feet. Make it 60 feet. Stay back. Don't want your virus. Don't want your bug. Don't want your sin bug talking in my ear, okay? And so what do we do then? You know, how do we function? You know, well, it's relationship. It's Yeshua first, and then keeping the commandments, which allows us to walk in the blessing, be eternally with him, and then walk in this, his ability to love, walk in his ability to love us, okay? But to receive his love, we have to be willing to be in a relationship, right? And Hebraically, when we say love in the West and in English especially, it's an emotion, right? Oh, I love you, honey. And I just love my new ink pen. And I love my new car. And I just love this puppy. Well, wait a minute. What do we mean? So Hebraically, it's an action word. To love somebody means you move forward. You do something. Like, love the song. What have you done for me lately? There's Janet there. So, Yeshua, Yahweh uses this phrase in Exodus 20. He talks about that he shows mercy unto thousands. This is at the end of the Sabbath command. He says, showing mercy unto thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. That's interesting, isn't it? It sounds like he's telling us to work. Do you love me and keep my commandments? But that's not new, right? That's exactly what Yeshua said. He said, if you love me, keep my commandments. You're my friend if you do my commands. Okay? So what is that? That's the Hebraic thought, that if you truly have love, it's not just an emotion. It might not even be an emotion. It can be a stand. It can be, I get it. I understand you. I'm not like all fuzzy about this. I just want to give you my life. Okay? James talks about that. It's like, you know, you tell me about your faith. You tell me about what you believe. You know, ask your spouse, you know, what do they want to see? They don't want to hear a bunch of noise, or they want to see action. Because people can say anything. That's what James talked about. He's like, you just tell me you got faith. How do I know you have faith? Let me watch you. By the way, your spouse is saying the same thing. Like, I hear you. That's cool. I like that. I like hearing that, but I really need to see, I need to see some steps. I need to see you showing it. Showing mercy to thousands of those that love me, and I'm just going to add to it because I think this is what he's saying, and I'm not adding the scripture, I'm just expounding on what he's saying here because I know what that word means. Ahava is like just this love of God. It's like if we love him, we're going to respond. The love of God is something we just about have to respond to, as long as you're alive. Okay, you have to respond to it. So how does he want us to respond? Do he want us to get there and get down and do all this? No, just keep the instructions. Okay, Keep the instructions. And again, that's what Yeshua said. Love being an action word. Grace is the relationship. Torah is the roses. Torah are the roses that we bring to God out of love. Because if we say we love him, he's like, well, you don't have to bring me flowers because I'll make them. But I want you to just walk in my command. And is that because he needs that? No, it's because he wants us to be blessed. That's where the blessings are. So he's like, I want you, if you love me, keep my commandments, because what I really want is you to be blessed. And so to be blessed, I wrote these instructions here so you know how to act, you know how to operate, okay? To operate in love. And so when we do that, this love is not based on what we feel, because you don't really necessarily react. Like I feel really something, you might just, react just at the moment, but long term, that feeling can go away, okay? And what's left is this deep, powerful love that is actually not just what we feel, but it's what we believe, because we know who he is, we know where he stands, and we believe that, and we walk in that. So our response then is actually what's called faith. Okay? It's what's called faith, biblical faith. Let me look here in Hebrews. Hebrews chapter 11. It says, by faith. By faith. It's very interesting. Now remember that faith is knowing who God is, knowing that we love him, and that we want to walk forward in what we believe, because we believe he's who he said he is, and we basically want him to believe that we're who we say we are. Okay? It says, by faith, verse 4, Abel offered to God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain. Okay? And so you got one who's bringing, Abel, what does he bring? He brings a blood sacrifice. So Abel bringing a blood sacrifice, he's recognizing that what's Cain bringing? Cain is just bringing the fruit of the ground, the work of his hands. So he's bringing the work of the fruit of his labor, right? Why does God tell us to bring the blood of a firstborn, the blood of a little lamb or something? Because we can't make one of those. Only God can make that. And so he's showing really what's happening here by his faith is talking about understanding in faith. And so Abel's sacrifice is more excellent because it's not just the work of his hands. In fact, Hebraically, it appears to say that he also brought, in Greek, he also brought, okay? And so he brought a grain sacrifice too, but he also brought, okay, a blood sacrifice, because he recognizes that his sins are not going to be covered by the work of his hands. So he brings a blood sacrifice, and that's what it was called. That was what it was called for. So it's very interesting, this whole concept of, and this is what I really want you to get, the concept that walking in the instructions of God is somehow helping your status with God. It's just like if we have a kid and we want them to walk in blessings, say, here, if you'll do this, you do this, and you do this, you'll be blessed. I want you to do this. Do we want them to do it because it's going to help us? No, we want them to do it because we love them and it's going to help them. Right? That makes sense? And so that's really what grace is, and that's what God's giving us. And so the faith then is that I believe you, I respect you, and I'm going to do that. And you're going to love me more when I do it. Like, no, not really. I loved you a whole bunch to give you the instructions to start with so you can walk in blessing. That's what God's doing. So don't forget that if we are doing anything that we think adds to our salvation, that adds to our merit, you've fallen from grace. You've stepped absolutely into works. Okay? And so that's what it means. You've stepped out of, you've fallen, you've moved into something else. Because grace is just the love of God being manifest. And we see it over and over and over before even the Torah is given. Okay? That's how they came out of Egypt. That's how we will come out of the world, by the blood of Messiah Yeshua. Amen? Hallelujah.